this bill is the definition of a solution looking for a problem. In fact, you are more likely to die from being stabbed than die from a gun transfer used in the commission of a crime. Long gun transfers are not the cause of the crime that this bill is looking to seek. And that's according to FBI data.
This bill is unenforceable. How can these private transactions be monitored by the government? How will law enforcement regulate these transactions when they already struggle to regulate control of guns by those who do not legally possess them? Criminals will still obtain firearms illegally or otherwise and ignore these rules. For 3 years, I have introduced a bill that would make it a felon to steal a firearm. Have been unable to get it even out of committee up to this point. This year, the bill was House Bill 633. I presented the bill yesterday in Judiciary. Only legal, law-abiding gun owners will be harmed by the implementation of this bill.
UC Davis, they studied it. Daniel Webster came to my committee to discuss this bill. He said he liked this bill. You know what he didn't mention? His study. Not until he was asked about it. And then you know what he said? He said he still thinks this bill is good and he still thinks background checks work, even though the science totally disagrees. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not science. That is religion. That is the worst kind of religiosity imaginable. We are passing laws that have no foundation in fact.
Since 9/11, 2001, we've lost over 5,600 people in our great city of Baltimore City to gun crimes. And one of the interesting and sad statistics regarding those losses of lives is that 98% were committed by theft of committed by firearms that were stolen or otherwise illegally trafficked. And yet, this bill will criminalize the average person, the average law-abiding citizen in Maryland, whereas a theft of a firearm that's causing some of the most egregious violence in our state barely punishes that individual. For instance, theft of a firearm presently is only up to a $500 fine and up to 6 months in jail.
But this bill imposes strict liability on a defendant regardless of his or her intent. In other words, the defendant doesn't have to know that the transfer is illegal to be culpable. Now, the Supreme Court has already opined several times in a whole line of cases that strict liability laws are disfavored because the High Court has said repeatedly that an accused must have acted with a culpable mental state, i.e., intent. At a time when we are decriminalizing this and getting rid of mandatory minimums for that, it's the height of hypocrisy to impose strict liability for what could be an innocent mistake, like transferring a long gun in the same manner which they've been transferred for hundreds of years.
This is one of the most divisive and one of the most hurtful bills that this General Assembly's ever passed. When we leave home to come to Annapolis, we're supposed to help our constituents back home and also the residents in other parts of the state, much like we're doing in a bipartisan fashion today with the Relief Act. This bill does neither to help your constituents or mine. Our state has nothing to gain by overriding this veto. We talk about how diverse our state is. We talk about coming together as one Maryland. One Maryland has become a cliche here. Make no mistake about it. This bill further divides us. Let me repeat that because it's meaningful and it's the reality that we currently live in. Overriding this veto will further divide us. Across the country, we've become further divided geographically and politically. In Maryland, we're supposed to be better than that. Time and time again, our rural legislators are pleading for help. We're fighting for the most important industries and our way of life. Time and time again, this body is hostile to rural residents. It's the urban and suburban legislators who are systematically destroying our way of life. And in this case, it doesn't make any sense because there's no meaningful or measurable benefit to anyone.
What has happened to legal gun ownership in Maryland since the O'Malley gun laws were enacted is a disgrace. It is a disgrace. Legal handgun purchases, that's legal handgun purchases, have decreased by 80%, while illegal purchases have become normal in certain areas and firearm-related crimes have skyrocketed. Just watch the evening news. Everyone, think about that reality before you vote today, whether you're making Maryland a safer place.
One of the reasons I think that our political allegiances, our personal allegiances to each other are fraying at such an extent, not only in the nation, but here in our state, is because of bills like this. And I know that that was not the intent, and that is not the plan, and that is not the wish and the hope of my very good friend, who is the floor manager and the sponsor of this bill. I know it's not. I know that she would never, ever want to do that intentionally, to fray our political bonds. But there are such severe and significant cultural differences that we've heard about today, where my friends from the Eastern Shore are worried about their children and their children's friends potentially making a mistake and leaving a gun that they borrowed to hunt a duck in the trunk of their car, and they get in an accident or they get pulled over for a ticket, and they're criminals. And they're scared about that, and they're worried about that. We don't need bills like this. There is a cultural divide that is provoking too much discord. Bills that would affect gun ownership or would affect the usage of guns, that would honestly prevent violence on a significant scale, I think many, many, many people in this chamber of both parties would support. None of us want to see guns, handguns, shotguns, rifles, knives, hammers. None of us want to see anyone use these implements to commit crimes of violence. But at the end of the day, I have to share, I think, the impression of many that this bill is highly, highly unlikely to ever really prevent a crime. Because if you are a career criminal, if you are a madman, if you are, I'll use a George W. Bush who had an interesting syntax. He called people evildoers. If you are an evildoer, if you get up in the morning and your heart is set on committing acts of violence against people, whether it's someone in your family, whether it's to rob a store, whether it's to walk into a legislative body and hurt people, this bill is not going to stop you. It's not going to change anything. We have some of the strictest gun control laws in America, in our state, and yet our state has very high rates of gun violence. They haven't changed anything.